Going to go ahead and start. I think everyone knows me. I'm Star Coming Bright. I am the co-chair with Andrea Morgenstein, who's right beside me. There are a couple board members here: Bill Hom, Liz Loeper, Bob Sweeney, the big R, Fred Bodie, who's Fred there. And we have, I think, a couple of other board members coming, as well as other GunSenseUs members who will be here eventually. I'm just going to mention that we have 3 events coming up. One is this coming Saturday in Westchester at the Advent Lutheran Church. It just got scheduled. It's a community empowerment event. There's a 2-mile run, walk, leap, whatever, and it runs from 9 to 2, and we need help. And I think Fred is sending out an email tonight, but I wanted to let people know about it. That's this Saturday. June 4th, we have a Wear Orange event in Westchester Saturday morning. We're still working out the details, but it's going to be a combination of the 4 most active gun violence prevention groups in Chester County. So it's there'll be Moms Demand Action, Ceasefire PA, Tom Buglio's United Universalists Social Justice PA group, and of course GunSenseUs. And then on June 11th at Tabernacle Baptist Church in Coatesville on Coates Street, we have a gun lock. Well, we have a gun safety day there and we'll be distributing gun locks as well as information about safe gun storage. And we haven't sent out either, any of this information yet, but I just want to let people know because this time of year, the calendars get crowded. So it's nice to know what's coming up. And Andy Hubbard is the person who actually does the organization of these events, but we'll be sending all that information in the emails that we send to our members. So tonight we have 2 presentations by survivors. Survivors are members of a club that no one wants to belong to, and I find every survivor story is a story of devastating loss with lots of ripple effects into lives surrounding the person. And I feel like we can't grow immune to these stories. I mean, as they may be difficult to listen to, it may be difficult to see all the lives that are affected by these ripple effects, but we can learn from these stories. What we can learn is ways to prevent this from happening again. And those are the things that we work on, whether it's safe gun storage or extremist protection order or domestic violence, relinquishment of guns, or training before people buy a gun so that they know what they're doing. So I'm really appreciative of the people who are here tonight. Jennifer, I think we figured out we met about 5 years ago, and Jennifer at the time was becoming active with Moms Demand Action, and I was active with GunSenseUs, and we've spoken together at a number of times at different events. And Joe and Liz Loeper, I think Liz joined our board about, did you say 2 years ago? A little bit more than 2 years ago.
A little over 2 years.
Yeah, and both Liz and Joe have been highly involved in GunSenseUs. Liz as a board member, but both of them also as legislative liaisons. And this is an all-volunteer organization, and we depend on people our volunteers to help out. This is how it works, and this is how we get the word out about solutions. So with that, I'm just going to welcome you to this event, and I'm not sure who decided to go first. Did you decide earlier on?
I don't think we did. I'll go second, unless somebody feels strongly.
Whatever you prefer, it's fine.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, so Joe and I are going to tag team on this story since it's the same story with slightly different viewpoints. But whenever I talk about this, I want you to see our son as a person first. So Jamie was 22 when he was killed. He was a tall guy. He was a friendly guy, very funny, loved to meet people, was a political science major, and even had volunteered as a job with, believe it or not, the Republican Party, because it was a job after he graduated. And he went through West Philadelphia knocking on doors to encourage the people who opened the door to vote for the Republican candidate, who he wasn't going to vote for. But that was beside the point. And we asked him how that went. And he's like, well, you know, some people slam the door, but I had some really fun conversations. He was a ballot watcher, a poll watcher, again, in Philadelphia at a church. And two ladies, he went out for a minute and two ladies locked him out of the church. So he just laughed about this stuff and sort of dealt with it as it went. And he could argue one point and then turn around and argue the other point. We always thought he had the makings of a great lawyer, but unfortunately he didn't have that chance. So that was Jamie. And Star, you said something really important at the beginning, which was, you know, these are stories. And I think that we get so numb in society and we don't do anything because we are overwhelmed by numbers and the amounts of time. And I can prove that to you in about 45 seconds. As a nurse and a nurse who was involved in public health and community health for a while, I always look at statistics. So today, as of May 19th, for the Gun Violence Archives, I'll go through these quickly, 16,478 deaths have occurred this year. Homicide, murder, and unintentional deaths were 7,304 of those. Suicide was 9,174. And injuries were 13,595. There were 204 mass shootings as of today. Mass shooting, as you know, is probably, as you probably know, is defined as a murder, shooting of more than 4 people, excuse me. There were 9 mass murders. The number of children 0 to 11 died were 118. Those injured were 273. These are alarming increases in the rate of infant deaths. The number of teens that have been killed by gun violence is 485 and injured is 1,738. I think I did that under 45 seconds. And I bet at some point you kind of stopped listening a little bit because we hear these numbers, but every one of those numbers is a story of someone's loved one. And every one of those numbers radiates to the circle that they caused. I doubt there's very few people that aren't aware of somebody in their circle, either close or further out, that's been killed by gun for whatever reason. So those are the examples that I have, that just frequency of these occurrences and the amount of stories and the numbers make us numb, and we just forget our compassion sometimes, and that's hard. So Joe's turn for a little bit here.
Yeah, I'm just going to take a minute and walk you through the circumstances of Jamie, the accident that Jamie went through. As Liz said, he was a recent graduate of Temple. He graduated in May of that year, and he was just kind of kicking around trying to figure out what he wanted to do. You know, after college, he decided to stay in Philadelphia. He enjoyed living in the city, and he had been working at a pizza shop through his senior year, and he actually continued that after graduation. So the accident actually occurred in January. So he was working one night in the shop with a delivery guy. You know, and I don't know. There were, I guess, two other people in there as well. And maybe 10 o'clock, I think some teenage boys came in with hoodies up, and you know, it seemed like they were going to make some trouble in there. You know, it's in the middle of Philadelphia. You never know what's going to happen. So, you know, the guys in the shop really didn't feel that well about it, and actually the one driver that was on duty that night, he had a weapon with him, and actually a powerful weapon. And, you know, I guess in some ways you can't really blame him for having that. You know, a pizza delivery guy in Philadelphia, you hear stories about them getting in sticky situations as well. But at any rate, that night, they were able to, the boys, the teenage boys that came in, fortunately, they were able to actually turn them, get them, talk to them, and actually get them out of the store before anything bad happened. But after, so they actually got them out of the store, but there was some concern that they were gonna, I guess, come back in the store and maybe even get into a basement window. So the fellow that had the gun, the pizza delivery guy, he was going down a ladder down to the basement, and Jamie was up at the top of the ladder, and unfortunately he didn't handle his gun safely, and it went off, and it hit Jamie, and went right into his stomach and did a lot of damage to him. They took him to the hospital, but he didn't survive past I guess midnight of that night. So I guess the thing that really, some of the takeaways that I have from it are, there's a question of, do you need a gun for protection? That's a big question to ask. I don't have a gun. We've never had guns in our family. So obviously we don't feel strongly about it, but I know that some people do feel that way. But I guess a very tragic circumstances of this was that he had such a powerful weapon that when it went off, it went, just one shot did so much damage to Jamie that he wasn't able to survive. So, I mean, that's one question that I come away with that. And the other thing that really ties into what GunSenseUs does, one of the recent goals is the training. The gun owner did not have the training. Obviously, if you had training, you would have had a safety on, you would have put the gun away or make sure you weren't pointing it at somebody. So, I mean, to me, that really ties into one of the things we're trying to push with GunSenseUs. So there's a whole bunch of other issues that are involved there, but you got to start somewhere. So that's one of the values we see, big values we see with GunSenseUs. You can't tackle everything, but we're just focusing on a couple main issues, and training is one of them. And this is really a good example of where that would have really been a great benefit.
So obviously there's fallout after Jamie was our first child. He died 6 months after graduating from college. We had 3 other children. It was devastating for our family, as you can imagine. And so at the time, I was a nurse in Philadelphia doing high-risk home care, and where he was killed, I would go by regularly. So I was unable to do that. I would go every which way through Philadelphia to avoid the area that he had been killed in. And so about 10 months into this, I decided one day I'm just going to stop and go in. So I went into the pizza place, and the owner was there, and he recognized me right away, of course. And he showed me exactly what happened and where it was. And what happened was as the gentleman with the gun stepped backward and started to fall, because he had the gun in his hand with the trigger off, he lifted his hand up, and he was probably 2 feet away from Jamie. So he shot him very closely. It lodged in a major artery. I had worked at University of Pennsylvania for my first 15 years of my career. That was the nearest hospital. He got there. He bled out almost immediately. They took him into surgery and he passed away. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that kind of grief. You go through different periods of grief, and you hear about complicated grief, which is, what is considered prolonged grief. And for us, you'd have these, there was heavy mourning. I think we talked to each other, and we weren't quite right for about 4 years after that experience, but we were able to, I stayed away from work for about 6 weeks, and then I went back, but it was hard. And like I said, I would change my territory. And finally, after, by 2005, I realized I just couldn't do that work anymore. And I had loved that job. So that's what got me into a different type of nursing, and I became a nurse educator. But I missed that. But you go through grief, and at first we would take these long walks together, and we would, our conversation, I remember several times just kind of saying, how do we respond to this? What are we to do now? Besides raising our children, it's like, we have to do something. And so we started with fundraising for something that was really near and dear to Jamie's heart, St. John's Hospice, where he had an internship when he was in college right before he graduated. And then we decided, he talked to me at one point about, I guess, Thanksgiving time before he died. And he said that what he noticed was that by the time the kids were around 16 years old, they'd made their choices of if they were going to be, in gangs or not. And he said that the people that if you wanted to reach kids in that area, he thought 12 or 13 was about the best time to do it. So then we started focusing our efforts on gun violence prevention and conflict resolution skills by sponsoring children to go to leadership camps. And we did that for several years. And then meanwhile, though, you're watching the news and there's just shooting after shooting. And we thought, surely if a congressional person was shot, something would be done. So Gabby Gifford's shooting came and went. And that's when we went into that thoughts and prayers as a nation stage, where we always send out thoughts and prayers. And then around that time, Michael Vick's dogs were in the news. And I remember, everybody was talking about Michael Vick's dogs. And I remember thinking to myself, people care more about Michael Vick's dog. And I'm a dog lover, let me put that out there. But people care more about Michael Vick's dogs than they do about my son's death and the death of all these young men in Philadelphia and all these people who are getting shot. They care more about Michael Vick's dogs. And that really made me angry. So I went through a little anger phase and then that whole thing. And then, but we had incredible friends, an incredible family, and we have strong faith, and all of that supported us. And so finally, when Sandy Hook occurred and nothing happened, and there were more thoughts and prayers, and nothing happened for those people. I've been to a march in Washington, the Moms March, and nothing happened. And so we joined GunSenseUs because we realized that, you got to do something to move the legislation. So the background checks, the extreme risk protection orders, and of course, training for first-time gun orders. This felt like something we could do. I come from a military family. I'm not in the military myself, so guns are something that my family have used, and I understand the need to defend. And I've also met enough people who've told me their stories where I understand, because of the violence that they experienced and the horrors that they experienced because of someone abusing or torturing them, that they felt more comfortable carrying a gun, and they got training, and I respect that. So that's why GunSenseUs seemed to be a good organization for us. But I just want to also say, I know that there may be people here who are listening who have similar experiences, or know someone, but you do, and you can survive, and you can go on and celebrate the person that you lost. And so in our family, we get a lot out of life. And I think it's because our son was such an energetic guy, and it would be a dishonor to not enter into life fully and do good things in his honor. So that's why we tell these stories, and that's why we're so grateful that you listen. And we hope that no matter where you are on the spectrum of what you believe about guns and the role of legislators and the roles in our nation, that you can find something to do that will make a difference in this horrible situation. That we have ourselves in this nation where we just hear numbers and we become numb, and we care more about whatever's on our social feeds than we do about the deaths, because they're so mind-numbingly frequent. So that's the thing. We are grateful for all the support we've gotten over the years. It's made us better people. And I think that grief, while it's hard, you do end up restoring to a different person, still with strengths. And anybody I've met with a story similar to this, no matter what it was, whether they were shot, whether someone they loved were shot, whether they shot someone, we have long since forgiven the person and met with the person who killed our son. And that was a very interesting. We held hands and cried over an IHOP on City Line with pancakes. It was a really surreal experience, but it was important for him, and it was important for us that we do that. And I think we're very fortunate that we've been able to get through this. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
Well, I just, it has been 18 years since Jamie died, and it's not like a switch goes off and automatically everything's okay. it's just the loss is always there, but there's other things in life just kind of grow in around that, so it's always with you. But life goes on, and you just try to participate in it, and again, things just kind of fill in the gap that's there. That loss is still there, but those things do fill in around it, so that's a big help. And I'd also like to reinforce what Liz said about forgiveness. At the time that Jamie's accident occurred, we had a number, people are looking for somebody to blame, and obviously the person that mishandled the weapon was the obvious person, but we felt comfortable that it was an accident. It was, of course, a very tragic accident. It shouldn't have happened. But that's the way we went about that. And I think forgiveness is an important thing, because again, there were a lot. I mean, I think we even had lawyers come to the house talking. I don't quite remember how that happened, but some guy came over, and he's talking to us about maybe taking the person that caused the accident, or also the pizza shop, taking them to court. And there was just something that wasn't just right for us, not to be, if you're going to take somebody to court, what are you going to do? Make money off of your son's death, So I guess it's maybe a long rambling way of saying, forgiveness is a helpful thing. It's a difficult, we'd all like to have somebody to blame, but sometimes that's not going to get you where you need to go in life. So
There you have it. Thank you for listening.
Jennifer? We'll do questions or comments at the end for both of you. Oh, you did. Wait.
Thank you. I was trusting that you could read my lips. Thank you so much, Liz and Joe, for sharing Jamie with us. I know it's not easy, and to me it feels like a service to my lost loved one to do this. My name is Jennifer Lugar. I lost my husband Scott to gun suicide in 2009. We had daughters who were 7 and 13 at the time. I am going to cheat a little bit and show you a video that tells my family story. It makes it a little easier for me, and I think it kind of does a better job than I would do myself. I'm going to share my screen. It's just about 3 or 4 minutes. It was done by Voice of America. I haven't looked at these pictures forever. This is Scott the day that we bought our first home. This is our first home in Tampa, Florida. Here's a picture from our wedding. 3 or 4 years we knew each other before we got married. He died the week before our 10th anniversary. He did attempt with pills and alcohol, and it was not successful. My husband did have a handgun that he liked to use for target shooting. After his first suicide attempt, I did hide the gun. I knew it was not safe for him. A couple of months later, though, he was doing a lot better. He was getting a lot of help. He was improving. And we were going to our family's vacation home in North Carolina, and that's where he liked to shoot at targets. So he asked me for the gun back. I didn't want to give it to him, but he said he just wanted to feel normal. And I understood that. I wanted to feel normal. I wanted everything to be back to normal. So I returned his gun to him. He went to the mountains and shot at some milk jugs. And after that,
I lost track of it. Truly, life was up and down, and there was a lot going on. He had good days and bad days, and I completely forgot about it. On the day that he died, I was at work, and he called me to say goodbye. And I raced home and found the closet just torn apart. And I knew as soon as I saw the chaos in the closet, I remembered the gun. He was in his car, and the police approached him and tried to talk him out of it. They talked to him for quite a while, but ultimately he ended his life surrounded by police who were trying to help him. Right there?
Right there, yeah.
And what kind of gun was this?
This was a .22 rifle. And it was part of a buyback in New Haven, Connecticut. We invite people to turn their guns in, and working with the police, we get them destroyed, and then we make them into tools.
It was a really therapeutic experience to take this hammer and beat it into an instrument that will create life. I came to Washington, D.C. from to attend the National
Stop
Vigil
it.
for all victims of gun violence.
After that, it just gets into activism stuff. So
So you're a woman in the executive ranks of your career, or you hold a top-ranking position in your.
okay. I don't know how well you could hear that. I couldn't hear it very well. Liz and Joe, when you were talking about when you went to the pizza shop and the person walked you through what happened. I think I've met many brave people, many helpful people in this journey. The morning after my husband died, I had a knock on the door from one of the officers who was at the scene. And he asked if I wanted to know what happened because I wasn't there. And bravest man I've ever met in my life, who would walk into this scene and just offer information. It was so helpful. So I had kind of forgotten about that until you talked about the pizza place. It was so helpful to me to be able to know what happened. He had driven, it left the house because he didn't, I guess, was trying to protect me and the kids. And police officers helped me stay on the phone with him so they could triangulate the signal and figure out where he was. They sent up helicopters and located his car, and then tried to talk him out of it. So I was grateful to the police officer who came and filled in those gaps for me. So, at that moment, I never thought of myself as a survivor of gun violence. Truly, I didn't think of anything except my kids and trying to make our lives normal again. But as time went on, you watch the evening news and you notice every single mention of a gun death, and whether it is homicide or intimate partner violence or accidental shooting or suicide, it's like the common thread is easy access to guns and poor handling of guns. And so I kind of just started to really pay attention to that and think about what I could do. At first, I got involved with what I now call big GVP, all the big national organizations. And I'm grateful they taught me to speak up. They gave me opportunities to share my stories in ways that I think could have impact, speaking to legislators, speaking to community groups, getting media coverage. And that was all really helpful. It's often said in any movement that, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Star and Liz and Joe, that this wears you out. going and telling your personal story all the time. So I've come to think of it as not a sprint or a marathon, but a relay race. And a couple of years ago, I decided to kind of hand the baton for a while. I needed a break from going out there. I mean, it was once a week telling my story, and I didn't always have that handy video. So I have to go through it, and it's a lot. So just to fill in a little bit of the gaps that weren't in there, it's, you know, after my husband's first suicide attempt, he was hospitalized. He used pills and I think alcohol. He was very sick. He came very close to dying. And he was hospitalized for several days in a mental health unit. And when they felt that he was could safely be released, I had a very short meeting with a social worker at the hospital, and she handed me a checklist. Kind of, it was like where to get continuing mental health care. Schedule an appointment with a psychologist, seek counseling. And then it said at the end, if there's a gun in the home, remove it. And I had forgotten he did have a handgun, and he never used it. It was locked up. I think I had argued about it with him. I didn't want it in the house, but it was stored safely, and that's where we landed on the compromise. So I had maybe an hour between when I realized he was coming home and I had to secure that gun. So I ran to I think like Office Depot or Staples or somewhere and bought a tiny little safe, because it was all I knew to do. It was all I could think of to get a thing that locked it. And I climbed up the attic stairs and hid it in the Christmas ornaments. And that was my strategy. This was all so new to me. So the reason that I speak so strongly about ERPO laws is because I in that situation where I had a loved one who was clearly vulnerable. He had come to the attention of the authorities. You know, an ambulance brought him to the hospital. Everybody in the hospital knew what had happened. I was completely, had nothing in my life had prepared me for this moment. I had no idea what I could do. I had no resources. If someone had come to me at that time, that social worker at the hospital, instead of handing me the checklist, had told me that there was a resource that could get the gun safely removed from the home, and they would store it until until it was determined that he was no longer a danger, I absolutely would have taken them up on it. I was so alone and so confused and just bereft, and I had no idea what to do. I had nothing, just had no idea what to do. So if there had been an ERPO law in place and somebody had told me about it, he would have been the perfect candidate for it. And then in the coming months, when he definitely had ups and downs, and then it started being more downs than ups, and there wouldn't have been a gun in the house. And I don't know if it would have been a permanent solution. If he was very sick. He had, deep mental illness by the end. And I don't know that he wouldn't have eventually ended his life in some fashion, but I do know that every other method is far less lethal, and you get another chance to keep getting the help, keep getting the resources, keep getting your loved ones he had so much support. And I would have liked that chance. So in Pennsylvania, it's a huge uphill battle. I love to think of this as a bipartisan issue, but here, I don't see much evidence of that. So I think, talking to our elected officials, I've had the opportunity to tell my story to a lot of Pennsylvania legislators. In the Senate, last time I was at the state Senate for ERPO hearings, gosh, I've lost track, 3 years ago. Time has no meaning anymore. That gun fetish church up in the Poconos, the Mooney's son, I can't remember what it's called. sat behind me and heckled me as I told my stories to the senator. So, and nobody stopped him, so that's what we have a real challenge in Pennsylvania, because a lot of our legislators are bought and paid for by gun lobbies and are not interested in anything about safe storage, anything about training, anything about ERPO. They just reject out of hand because they're so afraid that they'll lose their base support. So let me see. I kind of went out of order and missed my notes, but I think I covered everything I wanted to. I am happy to answer any questions. And I really thank all of you for the work you're doing and just for being here tonight to listen. And like Liz said, keep feeling the feels, because that's what keeps us all going. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's confounding to me that we can't get basic gun laws passed. One legislator I know calls it the low-hanging fruit. Background checks, ERPO, and training prior to first purchase. And then I this winter saw an article. I think it came from The Hill, but there was a survey that was done and it wasn't a big survey. It was 1,000 gun owners, and they were asked if they supported background checks and ERPO personally. And I think it was about 84. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it was about 84% said they supported background checks, and maybe 78% said they supported ERPO. And then the next question was, do you think other gun owners support these bills the same way you do? And they thought maybe 30% of other gun owners supported these bills. So they weren't going to speak out because they didn't want to be ostracized by other gun owners. And, it's this, it turns into this sort of mindset that you can't break out of, because even though you may actually think something, you can't say it out loud. And certainly I've witnessed this in trying to get some people to speak that have said to me privately that they totally support what we're doing, yet they wouldn't speak in a Zoom or or publicly, because they didn't want to be ostracized by other gun owners. And when you just add this up, it just doesn't make, in truth, it's this conundrum that I don't know how to get people out of. I don't know how to get us out of. I just look at the situation. I think there was an article in the Atlantic recently talking about there's a lot of countries where there's, vitriol and hate, and people want to ostracize different groups, but it's in the United States where we have guns that people take that into their own hands and then shoot other people with whom they disagree, whether it's over a parking space or someone's kids that have their music on too loud in the car, or someone who is, for me it was someone who is mentally unstable. If there'd been an ERPO bill then, this guy who threatened his sister 3 weeks before she shot me could have been, she could have said, when she said she didn't want to prosecute him, she could have asked to have his gun removed. And instead, the police, when she didn't want to prosecute him, they just handed him his pistol back. And you just kind of go, wow. A lot of things that don't make sense. But what I do appreciate is people telling their stories and then looking at what could be done, the solutions that are available if we just work for them. And to me, it's just like we just need to keep talking. We need to keep working. we pass the baton on to other people and have their stories told. And there's always other people who need their stories told. I mean, so I just really appreciate you both, both you and Joe and Jennifer all speaking, because it really points to how we can learn. And I'm grateful for that. Anyone who wants to ask questions or make comments, please do so. This is your opportunity.
I just wanted to thank all of you for telling your stories. I know must be really difficult, especially after many times doing so and going through it again, but thank you very much. And just on the ERPO, have any of you talked to Todd Stevens? He's a Republican, and I heard him speak. I wasn't there, but I saw online him speaking about ERPO, which he's a Republican, and I think he wrote that bill. But
Did, and
I
have
was
you-
impressed with the way he spoke about it, which was surprising to me.
He wrote the bill and handed him with the NRA to make sure that it was palatable to them.
Huh,
He is
interesting.
someone I have worked with and simultaneously kept at arm's length because I don't entirely trust him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, thank you.
One thing, first of all, Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing that story. It's hard to hear. And I think it just takes a tremendous amount of heart and bravery and determination to go through that. So,
Thank you.
I mean, we are in that club, right? But it's still, sometimes things like that take my breath away. I often wonder if there was a way that we could find the gun owners who are in that, that group that acknowledge the statistics that you talked about. Yes, I think that we need these common sense gun laws, and get them to speak. I had a really interesting conversation with a guy who's a former sheriff and clearly understood and had all the NRA talking points at his fingertips, which is his right. And we kind of got to this place, where he listened and he could agree to, yes, this is important. And then he shared some stuff. We ended up like hugging, and he was walking away crying, not because of my story, but because of the story that it brought up from him. And when we have these connections like this through story, it matters. And I just think any of us who know people who have guns and are compassionate people, I think that they can talk to gun owners who are not yet thinking about those things better, perhaps, than we can.
That's
And
a
if
great
anybody
point.
has any comments on that, or ideas about that, I think that's really important.
I was on a CNN town hall about gun violence. And I believe that we were intentionally seated. I was seated in the audience with my friend Marianne Jacob, who worked in the library at Sandy Hook Elementary. And we were seated with these two men from, I can't remember the exact name of the organization, New Jersey Firearm Owners Association, these two gun guys. And I think they stuck us with them on purpose. Marianne is a Republican and a gun owner, and she was in the Sandy Hook shooting. So she is just about the perfect person to talk to these guys. And just as we were waiting for the show to begin, we engaged them and we were talking to them. And one of them had owned over 100 guns. And we asked about safe storage. He said he didn't need safe storage because he didn't have kids. And we were able to just very gently tag team this guy and talk about the myriad ways that having 100 unsecured weapons could ultimately, result in all kinds of mayhem. And when we left, he had agreed to get gun safes. So I think that it's those kinds of, how many times are you going to have the opportunity to do that? Not many, but if you do have, she and I just kind of wordlessly decided to befriend these guys and not speak to them judgmentally and not, argue, because nobody's going to change each other's mind by yelling at them. But after a really nice conversation where we asked about their families and we asked about, why they had the guns, we were really able to change one tiny thing.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
One of the things that we find when have these events where we have gun locks that we distribute is we have that opportunity to talk to people who have guns, and mention, we have a safe that people can, digital safe on the table, as well as the cable gun locks.
Mhm.
I'm actually pondering about getting one of those safes that you can bolt down under your seat in a car, just to show
Okay.
people, because a lot of guns are stolen out of cars. But just talking to people about, there's just so many ways that guns, that people can't predict everything that happens in life, right? That 4-year-old that shot himself in Coatesville, I think it was a cousin or something that left his gun on a bedside table in a different room. He didn't know the 4-year-old was going to go in there. But these are the things that happen. And if we can, as a group, keep working on giving out gun locks and talking to people about safe storage, and we had a board member that knew he got a bedside gun safe, and he had his, whatever the keypad was, that he could open it. He got it down to 3 seconds. So it's like the people who say, yeah, I got to be able to get it quickly if I, hear an intruder downstairs. Well, guess what? You can have it right in your safe beside your bed. And, it was a real example of how you can have a gun for defensive use, if that's what you want, and still have it safely stored.
Jennifer, I love the buyback story with the hammering away at the guns into
Yeah.
or jewelry or whatever. I think those are great.
He's a former minister. I can't remember his name. Sardi, know him? He has this, it's called Plowshares, I think, the organization.
Guns to Plowshares.
He goes around and gets guns donated and beats them into gardening equipment. It was all survivors. That I stopped it, but that was a meeting of Sandy Hook Promise. It was kind of a lobby day in DC, and they did that at the church that hosted us, and everybody there was a gun violence survivor, and beating the hell out of those guns was just super therapeutic.
There was a period of time where I had wanted to, I thought, well, let me just go into a gun shop and just see what this looked like. When I was really trying to think about, I went through a period where I was looking at every single detail, trying to find every possible bit of information about what occurred. And I could never do it because I just thought it would be so weird to walk in and say, well, let me see this type of gun. And but I thought about doing it a lot, but that for me was like just this big block, and I thought, can't go there. And even a couple of years ago with GunSenseUs, there was an opportunity to learn about gun safety and handle guns and things like that, and I was just like, not there yet, so the idea of pounding them into something useful, that's life-giving is really nice. I might be able to do that. I'm pretty sure I could. So
yeah, but I do think it's a really challenging situation because there's me personally, my family growing up, it just was not a part of our culture and our family life. But I know for a lot of people, it really is a very integral part to their growing up and their activities. I think that's what makes it such a challenging situation. They have good memories associated with, the activities, the hunting activities and things like that. So So it is a lot of different perspectives there. And I just think it's really complicated these days where everything seems to be very polarized politically. There's not much of a middle ground. Everybody seems to be all the way over on the left or all the way over on the right. And it's not just with guns. I think it's a lot of different things, but it's just a very challenging time right now to really seem to be able to get common sense middle ground things done. So hopefully at some point, that'll start to change. We just seem to be stuck in this kind of rut right now. And it's unfortunately that rut is not in the middle. It's like either all the way over to the left or all the way over to the right.
I mean, what we want to do is have gun owners and non-gun owners in our groups so people can talk. And we've done a number of building bridges events and having gun owners talk about owning guns, but safe with doing it safely. But to me, it seems like a one-on-one thing. It's not like you can talk to a whole group of people and have that effect. Anyone else? Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I truly appreciate the effort that goes into this, and not just showing up, but the telling of it. So take good care of yourselves and keep telling your stories when you're able to.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the work.
Yeah, thanks everybody.